Ruling the Countryside. Submitted to Prasita Ma'am. Submitted by Aaingini and Kumar. The East India Company becomes the Diwan. On 12th of August 1765, the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II granted the Diwani rights of Bengal, Bihar and Orissa to the East India Company. This was granted after the Battle of Buxar 1764. This was signed by Shah Alam II and Robert Clive in Clive's tent. Then the company became the chief financial administrator of Bengal. When the company achieved the right of Diwani, the responsibility of administrating the land and organizing its revenue also came on the shoulders of the company. The company's aim was to increase the revenue to buy fine cotton and silk cloth as cheaply as possible. Within a span of 5 years, the value of goods bought by the company in Bengal doubled. The company before 1865 purchased goods in India by importing gold and silver from Britain, but now it was financed by the revenue collected in Bengal. Artisanal production was in decline and agricultural cultivation shows sign of collapse. Then in 1770, a terrible famine occurred which killed 10 million people in Bengal. The permanent settlement. The permanent settlement of Bengal was introduced by the East India Company headed by the Governor-General Lord Cornwallis in 1793. This was basically an agreement between the company and the zamindars to fix the land revenue. First, it was introduced in Bengal, Bihar and Odisha. This was later followed in Northern Madras Presidency and the district of Varanasi. Cornwallis thought of this system inspired by the prevailing system of land revenue in England, where the landlords were the permanent masters of their holdings and they collected revenues from the peasants and looked after their interests. This system was also called the zamindari system. But the permanent settlement created many problems which the company officials discovered soon, that the zamindars did not invest in the improvement of the land. The revenue fixed by the company was so high that the zamindars found it difficult to pay. Those who did not pay the revenue lost his zamindari. Numerous zamindars were sold off at auctions conducted by the company. The prices in the market increased and cultivation expanded. Zamindars were able to earn profit, but the company was not, as it could not increase the revenue demand that was fixed permanently. Even then, the zamindars had no interest in improving the land, so some lost their lands in the earlier years due to the permanent settlement, whereas the others now learned that they can earn without investing. The villagers' cultivators found the system was very oppressive. The rent he had to pay to the zamindars was so high and his right on the land was not secure at all. To pay the rent, he had to take a loan from the moneylender often, and when they were not able to pay back, he was evicted from the land his ancestors had cultivated for generations. The MAHALWARI system. The MAHALWARI system was introduced by Holmes Mackenzie in 1822 and it was reviewed under Lord William Bentinck in 1833. This system was introduced in Northwest Frontier, Agra, Central Province, Gangetic Valley, Punjab, etc. This had the elements of both the zamindari and the RYOTWARI systems. This system divided the land into mahals. Sometimes a mahal was constituted by one or more villages. The tax was assessed on the mahal. Each individual farmer gave his share. Here also, the ownership rights were with the peasants. Revenue was collected by the village headmen or village leaders. It introduced the concept of average rents for different soil classes. The state share of the revenue was 66% of the rental value. The settlement was agreed upon for 30 years. The MUNRO or RYOTWARI system. The RYOTWARI system of land revenue was instituted in the late 18th century by Sir Thomas Munro, the governor of Madras, in 1819-26. First, it was tried on a small scale by Captain Alexander Reed in some of the areas that were taken over by the company after the wars with Tipu Sultan. This was practiced in the Madras and Bombay areas as well as Assam. In this system, the peasants or cultivators were regarded as the owners of the land. They had ownership rights, could sell, mortgage or gift the land. The taxes were directly collected by the government from the peasants. The rates were high and unlike the permanent settlement, they were open to being increased. If they failed to pay the taxes, they were evicted by the governments. Ryots means peasant cultivators. Here there were no middlemen as in the permanent settlement. But since high taxes had to be paid only in cash, the problem of moneylenders came into the show. They further burdened the peasants with heavy interest. Munro thought that the British should act as paternal fathers protecting the ryots. But within a few years, the new system was launched. It was clear that all was not well with them. As the revenue officials fixed extremely high revenue demands, the ryots started to flee to the countryside. The peasants were unable to pay the revenue and the villages were abandoned and deserted in many regions. Optimistic officials had imagined that the new system would transform the peasants into rich enterprising farmers, but this did not happen. The crops for Europe. Besides collecting farm revenues, the British realized that they could use Indian villages to grow crops like opium and indigo, which were in big demand at Europe. They also forced farmers to produce jute in Bengal, tea in Assam, sugarcane in Uttar Pradesh, wheat in Punjab, cotton in Maharashtra and Punjab, and rice in Madras. Does color have a history? Well, yes. This image is of a floral cotton print designed and produced by William Morris, the famous British poet and artist. This rich blue color in it is known as indigo because it was produced from a plant called indigo. In the 19th century, India was the biggest supplier of high-quality indigo in the world. But Italy, France and Britain had been the major buyers and exporters of Indian indigo for hundreds of years before that. Why there was demand for Indian indigo? Indigo plants need a tropical climate to grow in, making India the ideal place to grow indigo. In Europe, Indian indigo was available in limited quantities and at high prices. The European plant called woad also produces a violet and blue dye, so European producers of woad pressurized their government to ban the import of Indian indigo so they can sell woad without competition. But the color from woad was not as rich as that from the Indian indigo, and woad also gave out a terrible smell. So by the 17th century Industrial Revolution, European cloth makers convinced their governments to allow more imports of indigo, while France, Portugal, Spain and North America also started growing indigo in other parts of the world such as South America. Britain turns to India. The company tried many methods to increase indigo cultivation in India to meet the demand in Europe. By the end of the 18th century, Bengal indigo came to dominate the world market. In 1788, only about 30% of the indigo imported from Britain was from India, but by 1810 it went up to 95%. Attracted by the prospect of high profits, numerous Scotsmen and Englishmen came to India. They became indigo planters. Those who had no money to produce indigo could get loans from the company. How was indigo produced? After the harvest, the indigo plant was taken to the vats in the indigo factory. 3 or 4 vats were needed to manufacture the dye. Each vat had a separate function. The leaf strip of the indigo plant were first soaked in warm water in a vat, also known as fermenting or steeper vat, for several hours. When the plants fermented, the liquid begins to boil and bubble. Now the rotten leaves were taken out and the liquid drained into another vat that was placed just below the first vat. In the second vat, also known as the beater vat, the solution was continuously stirred and beaten with paddles. When the liquid gradually turns green and then blue, lime water was added to the vat. Gradually, the indigo separated out in flakes. A muddy sediment settled at the bottom of the vat and a clear liquid rose to the surface. This clear liquid will be drained off and the sediment, that is the indigo pulp, will be transferred to another vat, also known as the settling vat, and then pressed and dried for sale. How was indigo cultivated? Indigo cultivation was done mainly under one of the two systems known as Nij and Ryoti. The main difference between these two was that under niche cultivation, the planters grew indigo only in the land which he directly controlled. Under the RYOTS system, the planters forced the ryots or peasants to sign an agreement, sata, so that they could get loans, advances from the planters to grow indigo. The problem with niche cultivation. It was difficult to expand area under niche cultivation because indigo could be cultivated only on foot. All fertile lands were densely populated and occupied with food and other crops that Indians needed. So the planters tried to remove peasants from the area near indigo factories, which naturally led to tension and conflicts. Another problem was of labor availability. Huge indigo plantations needed many laborers, and that too in the same season when peasants were busy cultivating rice, their staple diet. Not only that, for 1 bigha of indigo cultivation, 2 plows were needed. For a large cultivation of indigo, many plows and bullocks were needed, which either the poor farmers didn't have or were busy in the rice fields. Indigo on the land of ryots. Under the RYOTS system, indigo planters forced the ryots and sometimes even influenced the village headman on behalf of the ryots to sign a contract, an agreement called the sata, in which those who signed got cash advances at low rates of interest to cultivate indigo on their fields. The seed and the drill were provided by the planters, and the cultivators had to prepare the soil, sow the seeds, and look after them. When the crop was harvested and delivered to the planter, a new loan was given to the ryot, and the cycle started all over again. Peasants who were initially tempted by the loan soon realized how harsh the system was. The price they got for the indigo they produced was very low, and the cycle continued. And the loans never ended. There were other problems too. The planters usually insisted that the indigo be cultivated on the best soils in which peasants preferred to cultivate their main food grain, rice. Indigo, moreover, had deep roots, so it exhausted the soil rapidly, and the land could not be sown with rice soon after an indigo harvest. The Blue Rebellion and after. In March 1859, thousands of ryots in Bengal refused to grow indigo and protested violently against indigo planters. Gomastas were beaten up, farmers refused to pay rent, attacked indigo factories with spears and swords. Many farmers declared that they would rather beg than grow indigo for the company. Those who worked in indigo factories were boycotted socially. The ryots also got support from the local zamindars and the village headman in their rebellion, because the landlords were also unhappy with the increasing power of the British indigo planters. The indigo peasants thought that the British government might help them with their struggle against the indigo planters, and the British government was already worried about another rebellion breaking out in India after the revolt of 1857, which resulted in the death of many British and Indian men, women and children. As the rebellion spread, intellectuals from Calcutta rushed to the indigo districts and wrote of the misery of the riots, the tyranny of the planters, and the horrors of the indigo system. Worried by the rebellion, the government brought in the military to protect the planters from assault. Ryots swore they would no longer take advances to sow indigo, nor be bullied by the planters' lathials, and set up the Indigo Commission to inquire into the system of indigo production. The commission found that the planters were guilty, criticized them for the forceful methods they used with indigo cultivators, and finally declared that indigo production was not profitable for the ryots. So, although the commission asked the ryots to fulfill their existing contracts, it also told them that they could refuse to produce indigo in the future. After the revolt, indigo production collapsed in Bengal, but the planters shifted their operations to Bihar. With the invention of synthetic dyes in the late 19th century, their business was affected, but yet they managed to expand the production. When Mahatma Gandhi returned from South Africa, a peasant from Bihar persuaded him to visit Champaran and see the plight of the indigo cultivators. So Gandhiji visited Champaran in 1917, which marked the beginning of the Champaran movement against the indigo planters. Thank you.